96% of what our brain is doing, we have absolutely no idea of, which is quite scary. So let's start with the ADD that's related to the hypermobility. If you are having to take lots of flashes of the world, you increase your sampling rate, but it means you burn through fuel very quickly. That's why we get exhausted. It's like when you hear those paparazzi, instead of them going click, click, you hear right? That's what your brain is doing. The problem is that's energetically very expensive. Right, your Ferrari brain, but it means you burn through fuel very quickly because you only have so much energy per second in the brain. And what we found was you don't just use more energy, you actually rob it from the periphery to the things you don't need and you dump it into the high concentration.
Welcome back to part 2 of the Eat, Burn, Sleep podcast. We are now jumping straight into the second part of this episode. If you haven't had a chance to listen to part 1, I invite you to go back and listen to it now. Let's continue the conversation and pick up right where we left off. Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our podcast with Nick Potter. We're talking about ADD, ADHD, hypermobility, gut health and pain. And Nick is going to explain to us the relationship between ADD and ADHD, gut health, and how we feel pain more.
So let's start with the ADD that's related to the hypermobility. If we go back to what we said earlier, which is that your brain is not feeling safe because you can't interpret the world in terms of perception and visual feedback. So what do you have to do? Your brain interprets the world by taking flash photography, if you like, but it's instead of just vision, it's multisensory. So at about 4 bits per second, okay, which is the same as actually a TV screen flashes, so you can't see the difference between these. Your body sitting there right now is taking multiple flashes of the world through your 5 senses. So it's feeling the temperature of the chair that you're on. You're feeling the temperature outside. It's feeling how rough the chair is. Where are you? Where's my body position? What's Nick saying? What does his aftershave smell like? All these things are coming in at multiple levels. You just don't know you're doing it because you couldn't be bothered with it. It has to be back in the subconscious brain. 96% of what our brain is doing, we have absolutely no idea of, which is quite scary. So you don't really know yourself as well as you think you do. So if you are having to take lots of flashes of the world, you increase what we now call your sampling rate. So instead of 4 bits per second, some people are operating at about 16. Now I've worked with these guys and they've measured that I'm taking flashes of the world at 16 bits per second. So you do see things that other people don't see. Because instead of having one photograph, it's like when you hear those paparazzi, instead of them going click, click, you hear right? That's what your brain is doing. The problem is that's energetically very expensive, right? Your Ferrari brain, but it means you burn through fuel very quickly. That's why we get exhausted. The problem is also that we tend, with the ADD element, what their problem is that normally when you walk so I've walked into the studio, my brain has subtly mapped it very quickly. I know what colour it is, I roughly know where everything is, but I've kind of put it to the back. And now what I need to do, so we call that default mode processing. Map the world and get an idea of the model of what's going on. Then we have to drop down into what we call focus tracking. Talk to Yalda. What I'm going to do, come in the room, talk to Yalda. What am I going to do? I'm going to go and get a glass of water. Okay, so we come out of one and into the other. The problem for us is that we're doing all of that all the time. So we're mapping the room. Our eyes are constantly going. You'll notice people have IDD, they struggle to concentrate on you. They struggle to concentrate. I can see it in my patients. You know, I'm a wordy guy, but within 5 minutes, I can see I've lost them. They've just gone. And I say, you didn't really pick that up, did you? And they go, no, you've lost me. So you have to read them as much as anything else. And they it's very stressful for them because they don't want to be rude to you, but they're deeply battling inside. They know they've lost it. He's going on. I can't pick this up. So you have to keep what we call high signal. You have to give them nuggets they want to bite into. So we have to have what's called high signal to noise ratio. Instead of having all the noise, we have to see something that really attracts us. We're like butterflies to a flame. Something gets our action. So I tend to keep moving with patients. I walk around a lot. I get them to walk around a lot with me. We sort of have this interactional processes because the movement and etc. just simply makes them do something autonomous that they can then focus on, separate from and focus on. So we've got a very, very busy brain. I, for example, went shopping the other day with my daughter. She wanted to buy a green shirt, a green blouse in Zara. And then she said, Dad, I quite fancy finding some green. And I said, there, a green that matches it. And she goes, you're a freak. Okay, which I have. But she said, you've seen everything that's green in the room. I said, well, you told me green was what you're looking for. So it is a kind of suit, but it's also, wow. And I scared myself with it. I think, yeah, you do see stuff. But that uses a lot of energy. It's not always an advantage. because you only have so much energy per second in the brain. And the really fascinating stuff that UCL's doing at the moment is that they can image this now. They can image the energy distribution in the brain. And what we found was you don't just use more energy, you actually rob it from the periphery to the things you don't need, and you dump it into the high concentration. But we're trying to do all of that all the time. So it's very exhausting.
I have definitely seen a huge improvement in my energy levels since I fixed my gut. So when 100%. I was younger, before even my diagnosis, I used to think I'm not like the other students. I get depleted very quickly and I needed to retreat. A very simple example, I went to this business school in France and I was part of the student union. We used to organize parties. And we would go to the party with a bus because the school didn't want us to drive. We would rent like these big nightclubs. And we had a bus coming back at 2 a.m., one coming back at 3 a.m., one coming back at 4 a.m. I was so happy as a member of the student union. One of us had to be in the bus to manage people and no one wanted to go home at 2 a.m. Okay? I was so happy to go home with the 2 a.m. bus.
Yeah.
Because by the time I hit 2 a.m., I just could feel the depletion in attention. Yeah. In taking care, talking to this person, talking to that person. And this is me at 20. I'm now 46. But I have a completely different diet. I've created, obviously, this anti-inflammatory lifestyle, which fixed my colitis and really improved my microbiota. I have so much more energy than then. I have less of a lot of symptoms. I used to get PMS. I used to get blood sugar dysregulation. I used to get a lot of lows. All these things we're talking about. Well, my ankle is still funny and I still bump into tables and break my toes. It's happened to me. I broke 2 toes bumping like the coffee table. But I definitely saw an improvement in my energy levels by fixing my diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, don't forget, through your gut is how you take in the nutrients that you need. And that chatter, that conversation, as I call it, which goes on between the brain and the bowel, is vital, because that is, your brain speaks to the outside world through your gut. That's the way I put it. It's like trees. Trees will grow their root systems towards bacteria that they need at the time. Now, everyone will know the experience, which is when you're going through a stressful period, you tend to want carbohydrates. You just naturally do. You just want sugar. Well, there's a reason for that, because it's a call to action. You might have to get up and fight and flight. You might have to go and do something. So that's why you continue to want it. And we know that what tends to happen is the brain switches on the receptors that are sensitive to the amylases and things that will actually do that for you. So there is a conversation with the outside world through the brain. And I think that I'll be interested to see with people like Tim Spector's work. I personally think we're seeing it the wrong way around. I think we need the inhabitation of our bowel with much of these microbiome. But I think that we need some of all of it. And then I think the brain calls to those enzymes, which is what they effectively are, when it needs to absorb something, just like the trees do. So during the winter, the trees are in a storage phase. So they literally put different root systems out towards different bacteria. They call to them, as it were, and they use them to absorb. But then when you're going to summer, where you're in your high respiratory rate, etc., you need an entirely different set. But you need to have all of them there. And you provide the environment where those bacteria can grow, because you make it able to do so. You actually provide them with energy. This, I think people don't realise, is as soon as they bind to the receptor, you're literally giving them physical energy. Otherwise, a bacteria can't engage itself. It can't digest on its own. And I think that's what this relationship's about. And I did check this with Oxford, actually. There's a very nice colleague's wife who's in microbiome technology, in research, and she said, actually, I'm inclined to agree with you. I thought she'd say, oh, no, you've got it all wrong. She said, no, I think that's probably what happens. I think it's so. If you don't stabilize your neural state, so if you stay stressed, there's no help giving yourself acidophilus. I've literally seen that. People got diarrhea because acidophilus doesn't digest carbohydrate. So I think you've got to work both ends. And this is, I think, what you've done with your work, almost unwittingly, is exactly that. It's not just about restoring your diet and nutrition. It's putting back in nutrition that speaks to what you're also trying to do with your neural state. Where am I? How do I keep myself calm? I've done my sleep that's better. And all of that. And that is a kind of homeostasis. You've just gone back to a state where you find that, look, if I stay within this parameter, I'm basically fine. And for somebody else, it'll be different.
Yeah, there is definitely a binary relationship between the brain and the gut.
100%.
I mean, it's been shown that, for example, a gratitude prayer instantly improves gut bacteria because you're releasing serotonin, oxytocin, and you're going into a parasympathetic state. If you are stressing your head, rest and digest shuts down because you go into a sympathetic state.
Yeah.
What I notice with my work is the relationship goes further. So there is a brain-gut connection, but also the gut sits on the spine and the vagus nerve links the spine to the gastrointestinal tract. So spinal health posture has a link with the gastrointestinal tract, which has a link with the brain. So we have a mental health, spinal alignment, gut health link, and also immune system health, because the majority of the immune system cells are in the gut.
Absolutely.
So it all works together at all times.
I think the other way of looking at it is that we always think that nature's our friend. We talk about the wonders of nature. It is wonderful, but it's also our worst enemy. It's trying a lot of the time to take us out. Right? There's a lot of bacteria you don't want in your bowel. Okay, Escherichia coli, Yersinia, all these nasties, and so you have to have the immune system there because you've got it. Also, don't forget, it's just a hollow tube. It is actually on the external surface of our body, effectively.
It is,
and it's also the other thing I remember talking to you about before, which one of the great things I realised when I wrote my book is only hollow organs feel pain. Now I've never spoken to a doctor that actually knew that, and I didn't know it. And the reason for that is because pain is an alarm system. It's an awareness, because the problem is if you've got an internal structure, a vault, which is your bowel, it's a huge place where you potentially have problems because you've got foreign bodies, you've got nasty bacteria, you've got bleeding, you've got things that can happen there. So your brain had to build an alarm system around all the organs that move. And of course, one of the reasons I was explaining some the other day about why more women feel pain is they have one more hollow organ than we do, your uterus.
Let me slow down on this
it's
fascinating concept. So the digestive tube that goes from the mouth all the way to the rectum is part of the outside body. So you put things from the outside. So no food is meant to go into your blood or into your liver, but the outside world goes through your digestive tract. So that's part of the outside body, hence the ability to feel pain there, just like in the uterus.
And just as you have skin bacteria in perfect balance, you know how women will get thrush if they're given antibiotics, etc. Well, it's exactly the same. The tube is in fact the external surface of the gut, but it's also absorptive, which the skin isn't. And it's there to break these nutrients down, reassimilate them into what's needed. The brain reorganizes that and sends it to where it's needed. So it's a bit, and we did in our neurolinguistics. We talk about, I have a gut feeling. I know we ruminate. Right, we digest. We also digest concepts, ideas. We break them down into usable pieces, which then helps us to understand where we are. It's exactly what you do. The analogies between brain and gut stuff is actually very similar for that very reason. You're doing the same kind of thing. You're processing molecules or ideas in the same kind of way. But if you don't have a filter system, if you don't have a pain system, which is something's wrong, something's harming you, then you're in big doo-doo. And it's exactly the same with the womb. And of course, attached to the womb is enormous amounts of meaning and affective. So in fact, if you look at where lots of the nerves from the womb go to, they actually end up in the insula, end up in the amygdala, which is your emotive center. Because caring about producing the child was incredibly important. And it's driven women for eons. So it's neurobiologically in women to care more and to worry more. And you see that if you look at their psychological profiles. They just have traits that are more orientated towards worrying, being concerned, being liked, because they have to work in groups. It's absolutely fascinating. And you see it because it's the future of your progeny.
I'm going to slow you down on this as well. So many women care much more about what other people think than men. Because what Nick just said is when we have babies, we are vulnerable. We need the group to survive. Humans need the group to survive. We've seen that during lockdown.
It gave us the planet.
Being removed from the group, we have anxiety. In a village, you have a baker, you have a fireman, you have a tailor. We all need each other to be able to survive. Humans survive in groups. And that's why being rejected, or for example, children who even on social media during lockdown, I've seen it, like teenage girls whose other friend kind of block them or hid the stories from them on Instagram. These children were completely safe at home. They were having total meltdown because from a primal standpoint, if we are rejected from the group, we don't survive. And even more for women because there's the time where we're carrying a child, when we have a young child, we need the group even more to protect us.
Yeah. There's safety in numbers, as we say, safety in groups. I think also, look, lockdown, I still to this day, I think it's the worst thing we ever did to humans, but we did to them the three things that we used to do to rats in Oxford, was isolation, uncertainty, and lack of agency, which in fact, in a study in Oxford into rats, actually, it was the lack of agency to escape your stressor that actually gave you cancer. And so, it was lung cancer, and they got it within a month. They would get fat, lose their hair, and get cancer. If you gave them an escape cage, and the stimulus, by the way, was just one cat hair. You put one cat hair in a cage, and a rat will try and gnaw its way through the bars to get away from it.
Wow!
If you give them and they get fat, then they go into the freeze phase. So this is why, going back to what we're saying, why the brain fog and things comes in, is because if you put a person through a stress response for a long enough time, they actually go into the third phase, which we always forget about, which is fright, flight, but freeze. And the three horsemen of the freeze phase are brain fog, fatigue, and pain.
Yep.
Brain fog stops you thinking, using energy. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, etc., stops you moving and using energy. And pain literally paralyzes you because if something hurts, you shut it down. So it's the way that your subconscious brain ultimately sabotages you. And this is what I think patients don't realize. It's gone beyond the fright-flight response. That's what a lot of these post-viral syndromes that I'm seeing. So all the post-COVID, all of these Lyme disease patients, all of these Epstein-Barr patients, what's actually going on is you go back in their history long enough, they were stressed way before they got the condition. So lockdown is what did it to them. You did to those people what we did to rats and cats, as I call it. And then what happens is they get an infection. Doesn't really matter what it is. It's just an infection. But the problem with that is that your immune system robs enormous amount of energy from your brain to mount an immune response. It's incredibly expensive. And you didn't have that. You didn't have the reserves in the first place. So they crash. Yeah. And they wonder why they can't get out of it. So all these post-viral fatigues, I think we need to radically reframe what they actually are, because they go away thinking they've still got some infection. I see it with the Lyme disease patients. I'm very cross about it, because you will always find antibodies to things. It doesn't mean you've got a disease. They did it with Epstein-Barr glandular fever for years. Well, 60% of the population's got Epstein-Barr in it.
Yeah, but
so we've got to rephrase, because these patients are terrified. They think they've got some intrinsic, nasty, gnawing disease that's ultimately eating them. We're going to get it with mold. Mold is a complete misdiagnosis, in my view. Lots of houses have got mold. And so, but of course, we'll find it in their system. Yeah, well, of course you will, because it's getting into their airways, it's getting things. But the brain, the body is very good at getting rid of mold.
So let me go back to.
We eat cheese, right?
I love how Nick just goes on. We could just let him run and continue talking, but
the trouble is, it's all so late.
Yeah, it's all related. But coming back to what you said, so the rat or the human has a stress going on, like the little cat's hair. Isolation, so that kicks in
I've lost my group. I've lost my
group. So that kicks in the sympathetic nervous system.
And cortisol initially as well, yeah.
And cortisol, which then shuts down the immune system and can lead to things like cancer. Mm-hmm. Because what's happening is your inflammation goes through the roof, and chronic inflammation creates gene activation of your poor genes, and this is cortisol-led, what you're describing. So there is this, this amazing book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Bessel.
And Bessel talks about the fact that almost every disease can be traced back to a stress happening in the body. Whether the stress is mental or physical, it can be something external, like exposure to toxins, or being a rat in a cage and you have no agency, and there is this hair from a cat and you're stuck, and so your complete immune system goes pear-shaped and you start developing issues.
I think so. I mean, I think Bessel's work's great. I think Gabor Mate's work. I think sometimes some of this stuff's gone a little bit too far. I love Gabor. I quoted him myself, but he's now kind of, if you were booed out of a cupboard as a child, you've got trauma. I think trauma is important because I also worked in foreign countries where we have poverty, Angola, India, etc. And kids are also very, very resilient. So I think we have to find a balance between this stuff. I think if you've had gross ACEs, as they call it, adverse childhood experiences, which is abuse and doing nasty things to kids, etc., then absolutely. I think, but I'm more interested by the fact that just modern society sells you that you're not safe, i.e. you can't be good enough, fast enough, healthy enough, good looking enough, tall enough, sexy enough, okay? Oh, and by the way, it's vulnerable at all times. That's a very, very stressful place to be. And it's not that it's the equivalent to not being chased by the saber-toothed tiger, but it is the equivalent that you saw him in the hedgerow last week. And now he's putting you're having to be hyper-vigilant, and you're having to, that's put your family at risk. And the modern version of that, debt, financial threat. That's enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? And so I think what we've got to look for is these modern parallels to what those ancient threats were. And they're much more insidious, and they sit there, and our perception is that we can handle them. And there's a wonderful quote by Raj Mataro, I think his name was, and he simply said, "It is no measure of health to be well adapted to a sick society." It's a brilliant state. What it implies is we're all in an adaptive state all the time. You can do that, we're designed to, but you're designed to do rest, recover, etc. Now you're in this constantly heightened state of neural arousal. Oh, and then you add in the negative sides of social media.
But it's been shown that even because the cortisol glands sit on top of the kidneys, and it's been shown that when you are in a stressful state at all times, your kidneys literally do this, and the cortisol response gets completely screwed. Whilst actually, the reason why I'm mentioning this is you've spoken about being stressed and resting. So taking those little breaks a few times a day. So with my private clients, I ask them, and I do this myself, is to stop during the day and just to remember that I'm in a great place, that they are in a great place. I'm healthy, everything's good, all is fine. Just to calm the nervous system down before moving on to the next task. Because if we are in a state of stress non-stop throughout the day without those little breaks, and that can mean going and standing by the window and looking at a tree.
Yeah. Being grateful.
Because do you remember, we've spoken about the fact that when we can't see far, when the peripheral vision is blocked, the cortisol levels go up.
Yep.
Because when we were cavemen, if we couldn't see far meant that we had a threat. And we're all day on our mobiles like this with small stressful thoughts. I'm not good enough, I'm not rich enough, I'm not beautiful enough. And then we just go crazy. Whilst if a few, 3-4 times a day, we just calm down.
Yeah. And just separate yourself from it. And I think from stimulus. I mean, that's the point. It's just stop stimulating all the time, and you don't realise where it's coming from. I mean, one of his frustrations, I was listening to all this stuff about Elon Musk doing outrageous things and saying, you don't have to listen to it. Of course you can want to stop him. There's nothing you can do about that. You could just not look at X, right? I don't. I mean, I'm too busy doing my work, and I love it, and I bury myself in it. And you need a distraction, of course, but there are other more pleasurable distractions. But also what we all forget is that there are very highly paid people behind these platforms who know exactly how your nervous system works and know you better than yourself because they are behavioural psychologists, and they know exactly what's going on in your brain and how to manipulate it. And we all think, oh yeah, but I'm different. Oh yeah, but. And what we don't want to really accept is that we're probably addicted to it. But the real issue is those guys sell to you on two things, sex and fear. It's that simple. Freudian basic principles, irrational drives. Stir them up, make them want it, and then sell them something. We can send them something, we can sell them. It's that simple. So if you don't have this, you'll be less off, you'll be less sexy, you'll be less this. And if you can combine both together, take this cream and you'll have a bigger willy, everybody's happy, right? So we buy the cream. But then when it doesn't work, we want another cream, okay? The real truth is, it ain't going to happen.
It's so true. I see it in my work. Many people in the health space want a quick fix.
Yeah.
Yesterday it was the celery juice.
The easy route.
Then it was the vegan, I don't know what. Now it's the carnivore diet. Now, and there's always some kind, Yalda, if I have a Irish sea moss, are all my problems going to get fixed?
Yeah.
I'm like, darling, I would love it if there was a shortcut, but you're going to have to jump on the Eat, Burn, Sleep lifestyle and do the 6-week reset.
And every Irish woman in the whole of Ireland would be magically beautiful. If that's But it is. But we do like easiness. I mean, the brain does naturally want to be in a lower energy state. So we do. The general thing for humans is to make life easy. So we like technology or whatever. But actually, what we forget is that adversity, suffering to a certain extent, discomfort, just going for a run. That's what exercise is about. Being uncomfortable for a minute also shows you that you get a dopamine spurt, that you've actually just conquered something, you've moved forward. And actually, more importantly, whatever that pain thing I had was, whether it was lactate or just burning muscles, etc., it just goes away and I recover. In fact, I'm better. So what's my evidence that pain is harmful to me in the first place?
Absolutely. So too much cortisol is negative, but we definitely, the brain benefits from a little bit of cortisol, a little bit of stress, just like exercise. Moderate exercise is wonderful for us. Extreme exercise, not so great.
No. And we see it in athletes, we train them to the level of the inflection curve. So they're just at the edge they're going to break, because that's the top of their curve. But we're equally aware that if you over push it, they drop down the backside of the curve. And what does that mean? They get a virus or they get injured. It's that predictable. So that's what heart rate variability things, all these things we measure. Yeah. But what actually, Hans Seeley, who's one of my great heroes in 1937, who very few people have sort of read properly, but he came up with what's called the general adaptive syndrome. And what he showed was multiple times, and he was completely right, if you continually stress something, 3 things happen. And this sums it up. The adrenal gland enlarges to produce more cortisol. The thymus gland and the lymphoid tissue disappear. It's fascinating, right?
Not great. That's your immune system.
Well, that's your immune system. So your T cell count drops. So you get viruses, right? And you absorb body fat, etc. Because you change, because the cortisol you're producing, whatever. So you get increased body mass and body center, etc. So he called it the chronic adaptive system, and we can do it for a little while. The great example was the Vietnamese War versus the Second World War. The Vietnamese War, the young soldiers had hearts of 50-year-olds by the time they came home, because they never, ever had a break from fighting. In the Second World War, although it was longer and particularly bigger and nastier, actually, this defect wasn't observed because you might be fighting for 2 weeks, but then you could have a month off.
Interesting.
Which is the equivalent to, I got attacked by the saber-toothed tiger, I got away, and now I'm making my new foddering area, I'm with my family, but I survived and I'm relaxing. But if you don't get those recovery phases, you can keep it up for a while, and then you crash, which is what we're seeing in these patients.
So interesting.
And with the ADD thing, you're more sensitive to that because you're already burning that fuel far faster than other people are. And you are more sensitive. I mean, my classic, mine's Jaffa cakes. I literally, I do the gag when I'm having the Jaffa cake because I never expected the jelly in them when I was a kid, right? So now it's like, And I once had the.
I find them revolting.
It's anything that doesn't feel like it looks. So the classic one is terracotta. Everyone goes, oh yeah, I don't like touching terracotta. And old-fashioned foam rubber on the nails. Nails down the blackboard. They go, and it's a massive overreaction, and that's the sensitivity. Because if you don't trust the world, for your proprioceptive reasons, you don't trust it with your sensory system either. So what do? You turn it up. You make it sensitive. It's like an alarm system that goes off when the butterfly comes in the room instead of needing a whole body to be picked up. It's oversensitive. But it's at all levels. So it's not you're sensitive, not Yalda's sensitive. Your nervous system is. So don't feel shame and guilt over it. It's just you, because your brain does X. And you can turn that down the more you adapt to reinforcing that actually I don't need to mistrust the world and there are strategies I can do for it. It literally changes as you do. But the perception is for the patients is they can't do anything. They're just freaks. They're weirdos. And sometimes some of them are even mildly autistic. So they really struggle to make relationships. They don't get the support mechanism. They were clumsy at school, so they were the parts. They didn't get the team. So they haven't got friends.
So Nick, if you had 3 points of action for anyone with ADHD, ADD, to improve their overall status, mental status, physical status, anxiety, and also body hypermobility, what would be the 3 points of action you would recommend?
First of all, psychologically embrace it. See it as a superpower, not a label, right? Because I see this a lot. My own daughter has it mildly, and she said, "It's funny, Dad. When I had the diagnosis, it's now made me more anxious because now I'm aware that I'm the ADHD kid." So even at 24, she's going, and of course it's making out. I said, no, Diane, that's just you. Forget the label. We just need to know that to help you do with some of it. But it's interesting how she suddenly wore, am I being too much? Am I over talking? Am I over this? You've just become. I said, look, just you're M. But yeah, some people are going to not like you because you're full on, but that's life, So I think embrace that it's a superpower, understand it. So read, there's some great books out there. Don't listen to educational psychologists who, although they've died in it, will sort of say, oh, you're a problem. It's just that the educational system doesn't suit us. Right? They don't know what to do with us because the middle 68% is who they look after. We sit up at the north end of the things, and it's really difficult. And we do find exams difficult, etc., because just the focus. The irony is their IQ is higher than everybody else in the class. That's the great thing. You have to have IQ to be ADHD because you couldn't be processing at that rate. So don't do yourself down. Go and talk to people who know about it. And I'm trying to produce at the moment, as you know, I'm trying to produce as much of this as possible for the general population because it's actually going to help people. They invariably go on to be highly creative, usually very successful, usually entrepreneurs.
Okay,
Funny that, isn't it? We're both sitting here.
So first point, embrace it.
Embrace it.
Second point.
Second, get hold of your sleep. You are night owls. All of these youngsters now, particularly all the millennials, all the Gen X, Gen Z, blah, 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 they're all night owls. Stop it. Grow up and put down your phone. I'm quite tough with them. And I'm brutal with that. I say, grow up. Because you're now of an age where you've got to make the decision yourself. And if you go to bed at 2:00 in the morning, you don't have a right to be a little shit in the morning because it's your fault. Okay? So it's like saying to somebody, don't have the next fag. You've already had 10 today. And don't have the next scotch. It's more dopamine. That's what they're all giving you. Okay? So you got to grow up with this little addiction you've got to not going to bed at night. So bed at 10:30. If you have to, put your laptop and everything else downstairs. Put it out of harm's way. Get hold of your sleep and you will be less anxious, you will recover better, and you'll be less of a pain in the arse with it. Okay? You'll be the less sand in the Vaseline, as I call it. All right? Get hold of your hydration. If you are hypermobile with it, then get hold of your hydration. Really control your internal mechanism, homeostatic mechanism, as much as possible. Don't eat crap. Don't eat endless carbs. It's really not hard. Increase your protein massively. Right, because it satiates you for all the things that you preach, okay? Do be less anti-inflammatory, but also you'll be less inflamed if your neural state. So going back to what we said, if your brain's in a better place, you won't need it. Inflammation is not your enemy. It's a healing mechanism, but if it gets stuck and it keeps going, it irritates you and produces pain.
That's correct. So inflammation is a healthy immune system response when the body needs to defend itself, but when it's running and chronic, that's when you have sand in the mechanism.
And you get gene change, and gene change ultimately can go the wrong way. We all know that. That's why a lot of autoimmune stuff can turn into cancer. That's why the more you can down-regulate that, the chances of those glitches in the system happening are much less. So I think this is why these chats are so vital, is because you're coming from the gut, I'm coming more from the sort of physical and body end. But why are we separating them? It's mad. That's why these conversations are so important. We don't have a word. We still talk about mind-body medicine. That still separates them.
Yeah.
Right? Your spinal cord, your spine is just an extension of your brain. It's how the nerves permeate through your body and talk to your body, and your body talks back. It's a beautiful relationship. It's a husband and wife relationship. But we've lost sight of that. And that was Descartes for years into the 80s. We were still doing medicine. We're still limited by you have a head and you have a brain. Nah, that's not the truth. And in fact, you are an embodied brain. Your brain cannot form patterns of the world without your body. So also look after your body. Do the postural work, do the exercise. And the other thing, as I say, go do exercise because you have avoided it most of your life. Girls particularly, they know it. They're not doing enough sport. They're being a bit lazy about it. They know that the first 3-6 weeks will probably be unpleasant. Yeah, well, that's just getting fit. But once you do it and you feel more embodied, your brain will calm down.
Absolutely.
Because there's less noise coming from the periphery. And if you learn to just accept that any new pattern of movement you learn, tennis racket, whatever it is, you need to do it 10 times, whereas your mate needs to do it 5 times. It's irritating, it's a pain in the butt, but it is it. But you will get it. It's just you have more error in the system, so you need to knock out the error. You need to do more iterations of the same thing to make it autonomous. But you will get it. It's just that when you were at school, you were so irritated by your friends getting it before you did, you gave up. Oh, I'm just crap at this, and walk away. Now, I've seen girls do that all the time. And it's just men just being a little bit more competitive. There are hypermobile boys too. but they're just that little bit more aggressive and they just nail it a bit longer. That's the only difference. They're just a bit more competitive. Whereas the girls are very quick to give up on it. Don't. Learn it, enjoy it, give yourself a new thing to do, learn new motor patterns, climbing, martial art, yoga, parkour, Pilates, whatever it is. But do it. And those 3 things will bring you out. And that will, by the way, will realign the three horsemen, which is the pulse rate, breathing rate, and blood pressure. And that will just come back together. Because by practicing them, regulating themselves, you get back into it. It's like moving a muscle again. You're stiff initially, and then it will get back into phase. And if you get your heart and brain into phase, your body will come on its own. You cannot separate the two. But I was saying to my son yesterday on my commute every day from Reading, every day there is a big wide staircase to go 1 floor. Nice shallow steps, they've made it really easy for you, and there is a tiny escalator to the left. And I videoed yesterday a 50-metre queue to get onto the escalator and an empty staircase to go 1 floor. That tells you a lot about us guys as a group. And this was young, old, female, multicultural, these were just people, and they were being very lazy.
Nick, thank you so much.
My pleasure. I'm sorry it's been such a variegated conversation, but
oh no, it's so interesting. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's so timely because the next podcast I'm recording is a solo podcast where I was going to talk about how you can lower your cortisol through nutrition. So that's going to be the part 3 to this. Yeah. So everyone just tune in to the next one. I highly recommend that you put your phones down and read The Meaning of Pain. It's a book that's absolutely fascinating. I read it back in 2018 when you published it, and it's available in 6 languages. I'm going to be linking it. It is already linked on my website on the Yalda Love page. Yeah. But now I want to reread it after our conversation because Nick has such a brilliant mind. I've learned so much reading that book, and I highly encourage you to do that. So put your phone in the kitchen in the evening before going to bed. Don't look at screens and read a real book. That's part of the Eat, Burn, Sleep program. Also, just to support, obviously, I would now add, since 2018, I'd add a lot to that book. I mean, nothing that I think was wrong, just add more. I'm launching something called Backbone, which is the concept, which is not just about spines, it's about with the backbone of your health and blah, blah, blah. But it's a lot of this is going to be put on the website, and we're going to be launching that as well. So if they want to get updates on that, we've already had contacts from people saying, so if I'm ADHD, could I be hypermobile? And actually I said, absolutely, why don't you just do a bait and score, see what you think? And then they go, oh, hello, right? And then they can go looking, because there's lots of stuff out there if you want to look for it. And we're very happy to provide that. We're very collaborative. So very happy to say, look, come and look at these elements of what's going on. And we're going to put up stuff like nice, easy infograms, which can say this equals this is why you do this. So they can just get that education and go out to a much wider public, hopefully. So it's going to become an ecosystem, hopefully. Amazing. I'll be linking your website so everyone can find it and come and find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you. You're doing great things.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to all of you for listening to this podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. It's always such a pleasure to talk about health because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Looking after our health is a daily thing, just like brushing our teeth. We've got to focus on it, we've got to do it right so we can live better and happier lives. For those of you who are not members of the platform yet, we have a discount code for all our podcast listeners. You can get 15% off the memberships. Just enter the code podcast15 at checkout. And make sure to read all the articles and all the free content we have on eatburnsleep.com to keep you motivated and informed and educated about living an anti-inflammatory lifestyle.